I have such a question. A while ago I asked the question where one could read about studying the system. At that time you advised the book Allatra, and if it was not possible to read Quran in the original, then at least the translation by Kuliyev. Since then, after the release of program Consciousness and Personality, from the inevitably dead to eternally alive, a question about consciousness arose. In the beginning, I looked for it in the external, how to study it, how to observe it. Then I began to observe myself and realized that I have a lot of craving for power. And consciousness is everywhere, literally in everything, in family, at home, in relationship with friends, at work, absolutely everywhere, completely. When I saw that the enemy was not in the external, but the enemy was within me. I really liked Tatiana's question in the program when she asked, "What is it that people do not see?" You answered, "People do not see everything." And in this description, when I saw my egoism, I saw that my primary surge, the secondary one, this desire to constantly argue with everyone, to win and to dominate, it stands out very strongly during the whole period of my life, my existence here, my sojourn. I want to ask, how? Throw a stone up, it will fall. Toss a bird up, it will fly. How can one see this elusiveness?
How to become a bird, yes?
Yes.
Well, I have simplified it. It is easy. Become. Right now, in your question, there have been basically all the answers. When you saw all the problems within yourself, you realized that they are not in the external. This is indeed so. And actually, this is true for every person. Any person who possesses consciousness, he is controllable anyway. Well, and a person is unable, let us say, to not possess consciousness, right? Only here, again, there begins what? Wordplay. Does a person possess consciousness, or does consciousness possess a person? Who is the master? And we have, if we pay attention, a lot of words. They are such palindromes that play with meaning. As in the case of a person possesses consciousness. But in reality, if we look deeper, then a person must possess consciousness. When you possess consciousness, you will become a bird. Even the answers lie in those very words. What is standing in your way? Nothing. Really, it is so. Let's just sort this out. In fact, this is an interesting topic. Of course, it was voiced first, this question. Presently, many people are still in such a state, let us say, of being controlled by consciousness. Usually, when a conversation begins, after about 15-20 minutes, a person already starts to communicate more freely. The personality wakes up a bit, inner fear goes away, and conversations become more free. Of course, it would be better if it had been voiced then, but this way is also interesting, to start with it. Every person experiences all the same things that you experience. However, some people implement it, others do not. Why? And here the whole question lies. Who is braver? Who, say, is more prone to what is called cowardice? Let's figure out what courage is. Let us start with this. It is an ability to overcome fear, inner fear. Yet, what is the source of fear? Again, that very consciousness. And no matter how we approach this, everywhere we see consciousness, a person is limited. On the one hand, we can say that it is impossible to do without consciousness in three-dimensionality. It is really so. Nothing can be done. Let us just say you won't drink water. You will not even know that your body needs to drink water or something else. We live in three-dimensionality. Even now, we're communicating. We're using our mind, that is, our consciousness, in order to trigger, launch the whole algorithm. But we do not perceive the very fact of how we speak and what we say, and why and how we hear, and who is the one that hears. And this whole process is omitted. But this is the main problem. When a person, say, becomes a little bit more free, this process is natural. Even molecular vibrations are perceived, meaning the sound wave which comes from the vocal cords and reaches the membranes. In order to start this process, the mechanism for all of this to be transformed, to be generated, for example, by the work of malleus in the incus that are behind the membrane, and to be transformed into an electrical signal, to reach certain neurons, and from there, through actuation, to go into consciousness, and then it is transformed and reaches our personality. It takes a certain amount of time. It is fast, but we do not notice it. That is, we perceive the reaction of our consciousness, of the body too, of the body, of consciousness, of everything else. Now, to explain this, just the basic tricks, yes. A lemon, people feel something, or have said something, or a person has become frightened. Some critical situation arises. Words are just words, but a person starts having chemical reactions. Why? Because there is a reaction to words, or some action that we perceive visually or in some other way. First comes the reaction of our body, meaning primary consciousness. It instantly reacts, activates itself, and only then an analysis is carried out by secondary consciousness. Well, everyone experienced this. A dog barked from round the corner, a hooligan came up, or let us say one ran into someone, and here such things emerge. Yet, what is the reason? There are just words. There is no threat. But there is an intonation, something else. We sense a certain fear. And there is a certain reaction first from our body, and then analysis is launched and we try to evaluate. And often, and this is also experienced by many but they do not like to talk about this, a person goes out into the street, especially in the evening, and for the most part, even during the day, people analyze and prepare for a certain meeting with someone.
Magic.
Well, there is no threat, there is nothing, but our consciousness is already brainwashing us that we will go out into the street, that we will meet some bad people, some hooligans, you must be ready for this and the like. What forces people, say, to go to gyms? Well, it's the truth. To ruin their health, practicing martial arts and others. To pump iron so as to build up muscles. First of all, what for? To please the female gender? Here we take men. No, this is secondary.
To defend oneself?
To scare away. Not to defend oneself. To scare away. With one's big, massive appearance. To scare off the offender. That is, a potential offender who can come up and do something bad to you. Isn't that so? It is. And where does this directive come from? Simple question. Yes, this happens in life. But how often does this happen? What, every day?
More often here than...
But all the time in the head, isn't it so? Consciousness says, you must be ready for this. A simple question. Who is ready for this? I do not take professionals who are in the call of duty or something else. They constantly face this, they see it every day. But they no longer react to hooliganic actions. But the directive is going on. A person lives all his life, has never met a bully in the street, but he has been engaged in martial arts all his life, practices, builds up his muscles, doesn't he? He does. Does it provide him with good health? Well, I have not seen a single athlete who would improve his health by seriously engaging in sports. Amateur sports, like therapeutic ones, yes, it is useful, there is no dispute. But professional sports have not provided anybody with health. So what's the reason? It's banal.
The monkey nature.
Fear? Desires?
Absolutely right. You have said it just in time. The monkey nature. It is the dominance of primary consciousness. Well, and again it begins. The aspiration to become, as they say, an alpha male. But the alpha male, it is not a fight for females. The alpha male is the ability to suppress, in the first place psychologically or visually, by one's appearance, yes, well, for them, let's say, to suppress an opponent or eliminate a potential threat. A constant struggle. And what do we see as a whole in the world? Well, politics is not our strong suit. We do not have to get into it. But what do we see? We see the same thing, meaning a fractal sandbox. Here we were born, yes, grew up a little, got into the sandbox, and now our relationships with kids of the same age that began to form in this sandbox when we were making molding shapes or sifting sand with a scoop, and from there it all begins and it ends, no matter who we became, presidents, anyone. All these effects, say, is repeated fractally exactly the same. Who has watched children in a sandbox? If 3 people have gathered, definitely 2 are against 1. 5 people, 2 are against 3. And this game begins in groups. We are all in groups, aren't we? While there are 2 people, they somehow get along. The 3rd one has appeared, the 2 are against 1 for sure. And immediately, the 2 of us are against him. He walked away. The 2 of us are already against him. Why? Because this is a natural way of survival, as they say in this world, and the like. Well, if we rely on Darwin's theory, then it's seems to be normal, it seems to be natural. But Darwin himself did not quite accept his own theory. That's where it all begins, because the concept of consciousness, it goes beyond evolution. We're not even speaking about spirituality, about a human's ability for something greater. I will digress a little from the spiritual theme and come back to experiments. It is now interesting, relevant. What is the essence of these experiments? And why have we decided to show metaphysical manifestations a little? And again, we are preparing another program. The guys are getting it ready. It is also an interesting program that will show what we do not see with our eyes, what our consciousness does not show and rejects as something that doesn't exist. The programs about skyfish have already come out, but we will also show plasmoids there. When the pyramid was turned off, there are cameras in the basement below. The pyramid was disconnected, and plasmoids were captured on camera after operation. That is, let's say, an activation of those invisible living organisms took place. And these are living organisms. They are organized and possess certain intelligence. This is a fact. Due to operation of the pyramid, we have disturbed a little, well, to use our language, the stability of the septon fields in this place. Therefore, they began to manifest themselves more. It is interesting. But the question is, why do we show this? And what is the point of all this? In general, I'm an opponent of manifestations of any metaphysical phenomena, and even more so of attempts to bring people to the truth with the help of such techniques. But on the other hand, for people to stop and think, meaning we took the easiest, the simplest way, like many in fact did it before us. But we are trying to give it in small doses and show only what someone somewhere has shown before. That is, we do not cross the line. We do not show that which has not been shown on that same YouTube or filmed by someone. In order for consciousness not to get too stressed out and not to worry too much, well, and we do not go beyond certain allowable limits, let's say. Yet the point of all this is to get people thinking, just to make them ponder that there is something that we do not see. It's like a certain tool, first of all, so that our consciousness would reach an impasse a little bit. It is clear that it begins to counteract and says, this cannot be, like with that very skyfish. Some make comments, not to ours, thanks God, but to José's, that a certain delay occurs on the cameras when they're filmed. That it's an ordinary butterfly or a little bug there that is stretched out in time. Excuse me, guys, here we have 5 to 6 meter long bugs flying along the street, and others who behave very intellectually, so to speak, and quite reasonably. Well, again, there are amazing shots when they fly out from under the ground. I don't know if José has such shots or not, but he has not shown them anyway. That is, it shows where they come from, how they penetrate. For them, a wall or something else is nothing. Well, again, there is interesting footage when we showed small skyfish for the first time during activation and launch. This is also interesting. Well, it's also interesting that the camera can capture what our eye cannot see. And that, in reality, what does our eye see? If we consider it, it does not see infrared light. We do not see that same X-ray. For example, now we are used to it. We believe in it because it has been proven. We film using infrared lighting. We do X-rays, and it's natural for us. Well, a couple of 100 years ago, it would have been a fairy tale to people, right? Meaning, we have learned to shoot it. Those very skyfish, thanks to the fact that José paid attention, he noticed, although they existed a long time ago, in any case, we talked about these skyfish with the guys when José had not seen them yet. Already 30 years have passed. Why? These are forms of life that really exist. It is interesting. There are also other forms of life that hinder people. They stand as a kind of certain guardians. And our consciousness is also a form of life. This must be understood, and it is not ours. Here we have such a symbiosis with it, but it's not quite right. On the one hand, consciousness helps us to live and exist in this three-dimensionality, but on the other hand, it has completely taken over our function. And in fact, it's enough to observe. We talked about this a lot, and everyone already knows this. Well, you have not ordered these thoughts, they come to you. You have not ordered these pictures, but they intrude. Now, you don't want to think about it as a personality you understand. Well, what am I now discussing? Sitting or going, especially when a person is left alone, but this happens. And sometimes it is hard for a person to stop the flow of these thoughts, and especially the involvement of actors of consciousness in this process of the performance, as we say, when primary and especially secondary consciousness begin discussions, when there is a split into triple and into double, and we, it seems, are at the same time listening to several actors inside our head. But this is not an illness. This is a normal operation of the brain. There are, of course, illnesses when voices are coming. Well, and again, it's not an illness either. This must be understood a little too. What we are touching on now is not quite studied, but in fact, this is so. And who has not encountered this? The one who cannot observe himself and fully identifies himself with consciousness, right? When there is at least a little freedom of understanding as a personality that you are not consciousness, then there is a simple question. Where do thoughts come from to you? And these are the dead-end moments when consciousness cannot even answer this question. Well, how? I am thinking, you are thinking, and why are you thinking exactly this way? Or when a person approaches an icon, well, for the Orthodox, they have icons, yes? And the dirt is coming out of the person, and on the other hand, there is a hope to get something. At least such an elementary example. After all, people in religion are in their majority guided and controlled by consciousness, and very few people speak about it honestly. Take that same prayer, for instance. As long ago as in the 2nd century, after Jesus, they already began to bring things up, when religion was not really formed yet. It was, say, only in the process of formation. I mean the Christian religion. It was disjoined. There were still the first Christians. Even then, the saints who lived by those principles of Jesus, they said that people who came to our religion couldn't even master the prayer. They don't know how to pray. They perform wrong prayers. What do we hear now from people who penetrate at least somewhat deep into the mystery of Christianity? They say the same thing. People cannot pray. They do not know how to pray. So what is the meaning of prayer then? Here is a simple question. The essence of prayer in any religion, it comes down to causing a certain perception through feelings. At that, perception through feelings is precisely the love of God, meaning to evoke a feeling of love and a feeling of unity or affinity with the world of God. That is the meaning of prayer. And under no circumstances is prayer an instrument for obtaining something. And here we have in Christianity such an expression as gaining of gifts, yes? Here many people have heard this. Yet what are gifts, do you know?
Grace.
Good.
Grace.
Grace. And what is grace?
A lot?
A lot.
Well, a lot, this is understandable to us. But what if we decipher? What is grace? Love.
A feeling of joy, love.
Again, it's a feeling, right? Meaning the feeling of joy. And how does it manifest itself? After all, if we take the saints, what was the point? A person receives certain, say, gifts. And for the saints, gifts are an ability to see and hear, that is, to perceive what we don't perceive in everyday life. Now, let's get back a bit again to our experiment. What have we got? Even literally the first days, and thank God we got so much feedback, so many letters have come. People who confirm that they feel the pyramid operation. What is this? This is a gift. That is, if we just remove all that superficial, what remains? The ability of perception through feelings in the first place, and the second is an understanding of the processes that underlie the ability of perceiving this world in a habitual way, by means of our consciousness, meaning of those tools to which we are accustomed. Here, basically, lies the meaning of these gifts. That's all it is. All the rest is already the deviation of religion into magic. When a person wants something with the help of God, he bargains or begs, scrambling and begging for some gifts for himself here, blessings, that is, earthly amenities are implied as gifts. Although again, any prophet who came, he said, if you want to earn, work. No need to beg from God. God will give, but the question is, what will you pay with? There is also a meaning in this. And everyone was against magic. Why? Because magic... We have already spoken on this topic, the difference between knowledge and magic. Does anyone know? Those who were at the previous meeting, please do not answer. The simple question is how they differ.
Knowledge can give freedom, and magic can, on the contrary, enslave.
Magic is ignorance.
Knowledge, perhaps, is what a person acquires with his own work, whereas magic is when he wants.
Yes.
When you want, but don't do.
Also to be born and receive. A miracle.
This is the use of Allatra force into anti-Allatra, into the system.
Well, a simple example. You want a chocolate, you just want it. Again, the desire that awakens, and your action when you want, you went and got the chocolate. What's this?
Magic. The essence is the picture that...
A picture that made you do it, which manipulates you. Or another possibility. You want a candy, but you do not have it. But you want it, see it. This candy literally appears in the hand of your friend. You coax it out of him, you've acquired this candy. This is magic. And here's the difference. Knowledge is when you've gone and earned money, bought candies and given it away to people without taking any for yourself. Whereas magic is when you've taken something from someone somewhere. Well, that is simple. Magic is what you do for yourself. Directly or indirectly, it does not matter. And knowledge is when you act using, say, those very metaphysical capabilities, but you manifest it or do it for people, but in no way for yourself, even indirectly. Here is such a big difference. Although the tool is the same, meaning a hammer is a hammer. We have talked about this many times. With a hammer, one can build a house, drive in nails, and do many useful things, or one can harm people. That's the difference. When you do harm, you are a criminal. When you're building a house, you're a hero, especially if you're building it not for yourself, but for people. But even if you do it for yourself, at least for your family, you are a hero. The difference, of course, is great, but it's still a tool. Okay, any other questions?
May I? Can I ask a question about how the system works? Say, the system attacks, and in general, in different ways, either via thoughts or some cloud or some kind of a slab. But it all comes down to the same thing. For example, if I see how the system attacks, how through my consciousness it tries to lead me away from the main thing. So I see the interest of the system, I see consciousness, and I feel. The main thing is that I feel something else. I feel that everything is fine, but nevertheless, somehow the system comes through.
And what is the question?
Why does it happen this way?
Well, because you are interested, there is a material attachment. There is, well, again, a desire that commands you.
That is, in fact...
It is just that a lie exists within you. I'm sorry, I will be straightforward for better understanding. One should live by the spiritual. Now, if you do not live by it, and you have hidden goals that are your priority, which again are like a mindset from consciousness, it will always work. What you have just listed, that is from consciousness. You will understand, know, feel, but you will... You know, like... When cows are led to slaughter, they are said to be crying. They know that they will be killed, but they go because there is no way out. Or like a frog in front of a boa, right? It knows that it will be eaten, but it crawls along. Because it is all simple. As you remember, I once said, get up and go. There is nothing easier. A life by the spiritual is life. Begin to live, and you will see everything. Yes, problems arise. Everywhere there can be problems. In the family, at work, anywhere. But again, they go away quickly if you do not succumb to this. But if it bothers you, if you start getting nervous, like that guy writes, here Volodya showed that... A very interesting example. I'll just briefly tell the story. He has started to work on himself. Maybe it would be better if you tell it?
Yes.
Well, tell us. Volodya will tell you. It is more interesting.
Yes, he's quite an interesting fellow. He says, I started practicing, monitoring all this in myself, and suddenly the system, well, he's a businessman, he travels to different cities, he has somewhere...
Well, let us be brief.
Yes, and then he says, I began to notice. As soon as I began to notice in myself how the system works, it all started to crumble at once. He says, these days, banks do not give loans. We were always considered creditworthy. For 8 years we worked fine, but then it all started to crumble. For some reason, neighbors began to look at us as cool. Well, that is, everything was going wrong, he says. Never in my life have such things happened. He says, I keep tracking, keep noticing, I laugh at it, but somewhere fear still comes. He says, I'm observing.
Why is this happening? Because somewhere the fear still comes. That was the key point. It would be less interesting if I had told you, but this way it is more revealing. If a person does not react, and we know a lot of such examples, if a person does not react, then everything is fine. If a person worries, is afraid that he will lose some kind of well-being or something else, the system will surely find the Achilles heel. And guys, believe me, it will strike it 100%. Why? Because, well, though it may sound insulting for the most highly developed being, the king of nature, to hear, he is merely food for the system. That is, our consciousness is the milking machine of the system itself, but it is highly universal. It enables us to live. It can even provide us with many goods and make us enjoy that very chocolate, as we have said, or something else. It will say, what else do you need? Yes, I gave you a chocolate bar, I gave you opportunities and self-fulfillment and the like. You can become anyone in this life, but in return, you have to give a bit of your attention, just attention. As a matter of fact, you do not lose anything. Remember deals with the devil and the like? In fact, well, what does the devil need your soul for? The soul is something alien in the material world, and it belongs to that world. Well, it would be funny if, say, the devil's world fought for someone's soul and wanted to take it. Well, it is as if some of you wanted to buy, let us say, at least a couple, on a large scale, grams of antimatter. What do you need it for, guys? To taste it? Well, this is absolutely the same. That is, imagine what would happen to a human if he tasted it. Well, I understand now physicists will say, like, these are nanograms. Well, but we will use a larger scale so that people could understand. A couple of grams of antimatter. That is what our soul really is to the devil. Whereas the struggle for our attention is a relevant thing. By removing false understanding, it gives a better understanding of how it is in reality. And so when people start to work on themselves, when perception through feelings begins to occur, of what is actually happening, how thoughts come, why such stories happen as Volodya told us, then they eventually understand how the system is arranged. It is not difficult, it is a sandbox. The situation simply develops depending on what level a person is at, and at what time or period of his life he encounters knowledge, and why he wants to perceive this knowledge. After all, consciousness rejects it. In fact, which of you has not blasphemed me, guys? Do not raise your hand, because you will lie. Because your consciousness tells you I'm a swindler, a liar, something else, that I'm sitting here telling fairy tales, and cusses and says everything imaginable. And the same goes for anyone who will watch us on TV or via the internet. Why? Because you perceive three-dimensionality, right? But I am an ordinary person, just like everyone else, doing messages. That's how I survive in this world. And here I sit chatting with you. How am I different from you? I am not, and I cannot be different. Therefore, consciousness perceives all this as exactly the same object that it can perceive in the mirror. But also, what I am saying is in fact deadly for it, and it is afraid that one of you will understand the essence of those words that I am saying. The best way is to convince you that this is nonsense. But it actively supports religion. The question is, why? Because it is a convenient form, a form of manipulation of personality by consciousness. That is, consciousness manipulates the personality. What does it receive in return? Plenty of attention. And what is attention? If we switch to Well, we will not switch to the language of physics. I will give a simple example, understandable to all of you. Quantum interactions. They will say understandable. It is clear. I will just say it in plain language. At the level of quantum interactions, very interesting things happen. When one particle interacting with another violates all the laws of physics, or when one atom appears in different places simultaneously. I will say even more, in different dimensions simultaneously, and this happens very often. But to us, it sounds now as if a bit complicated. Dimensions, we are used to living in one dimension, but people do not realize that they violate this law repeatedly during their life. And this is indeed so. That is, since we are made up of those very atoms, our bodies are made of them, and our consciousness, it is a field structure, it has nothing to do with the atom. However, let's say our brain, which perceives images and unfolds information into symbols images, and converts them into certain voices for perception by our primary consciousness, which are then delivered to the personality already as a fact. At that, these very neurons of the brain, they perform these jumps very quickly and very easily. Which of you has not experienced a déjà vu? A simple example. And what is looking into the future? And what is foresight and the like? Meaning, we wanted to conduct an interesting experiment. We came up against the fact that we still have to train an operator. What is an operator? A person who is, say, able to perceive reality at the level of personality. That is, those reactions that occur. If a person does not have this ability, then all these jumps, tunneling, are just empty words. That is, a person sits inside that very pyramid, working machine, and his consciousness says, well, let's see, what do you have here? Well, where is the miracle? I don't see it. And looks through these eyes. While these eyes are, sorry, like a camera, they can only see what they can. But a camera can see more than our eyes. Well, we have noticed this with skyfish and other things. And our eyes, they have a lesser capacity. And a person, again controlled by consciousness, he seeks to see precisely with these eyes. A simple question. And what do you guys think? How do thoughts come to you? Now relax and see what you perceive. You perceive a sound signal. A thought has come, yes? That is, it knocks. Hello, I'm your thought. Now you and I will think about, and the whole list of this. A picture comes. Pictures come to everyone's mind. These pictures are unfolded and converted into certain images. These images launch entire mechanisms, and only then the game of actors that we perceive begins. And the most interesting thing is that even people who are blind from birth think in pictures. Why? Because the thought, consciousness, it works with everyone in the same way. Another interesting point is that at the level when a thought comes to a person, a picture, information, it comes in proto-language, in the universal language. And then our consciousness reformats it into other languages, into different languages of the world, in which a person grew up. Meaning, those are artificial languages. Languages artificially created. We will not elaborate much upon this issue, but this is true. But a thought comes to everyone in the same way. There were examples, interesting examples, when people are sitting, talking for half an hour, understanding each other perfectly. An outsider comes up and says, guys, how do you understand each other? That is, draws attention. They get distracted from the conversation, and it turns out that they are speaking different languages. They're foreigners. That is, now they ceased to understand each other, while before they understood each other perfectly. This is not because they spoke sign language or something else. Each of them spoke their own language, but they were carried away by the conversation and got so absorbed that they easily perceived each other. That is, words are secondary. Well, it all comes out of this. As for, again, those very operators, yes, it is not that simple, it is problematic, although it is interesting. Now, if we go back to those very experiments, the very precognition, that is, looking into the future, why is it very interesting in the first place? Not because you can change something or see something. Consciousness of every person is interested in knowing what will happen to him. That is, the issues of magic are not indifferent to consciousness. And there is a reason for that. Why? Consciousness of almost every person strives for magic. as if forewarned is forearmed and the like, to know what will happen so that something can be changed and improve its existence here. The desire to possess these abilities is, first of all, again we return to the very fact that people go to gyms, engage in martial arts just in case. Same as here, so that, returning to the first question, to have power over other people. Striving for power, the desire to dominate someone. But does a personality need this? Does a person really need power as a personality? No, he or she does not. It is true, one does not need it. So what is the difference? Consciousness perceives the possibility, say, of leadership or management as power, whereas personality, it perceives it as responsibility, and the approach changes radically. And when in the group, for the GPA, well, if it worked, say, as it should, and people really worked on themselves, then a lot could be changed. Why? When a person is spiritually developed as a personality, he will not engage in dictatorship. But it also does not mean that he will be kind. That is, a person who is spiritually developed, he understands perfectly who he is talking to. Yet again, we return to the gifts, right? That is, in Christianity or religions, the gifts of God. That is, a person feels another person. What does it mean, feels? He perceives. He perceives clearly who is in front of him, who he is speaking with a person who is spiritually free, or he is talking with a part of the system. If a person is communicating with a part of the system, it is at once clear what the next steps of that very system will be. Well, what kind of mercy can we talk about here, right? Or when a person comes with an open heart and really needs help or something good, or say there is an initiative coming from this very person, it is quite easy to perceive too. From whom and what for, and what consequences will be for this very enterprise in the future. This is also an important factor, because everything can be calculated. But it is not calculated. Here again, I have just said can be calculated. But using consciousness in communication with you and translating this all into, say, an understandable language, the system puts in its 5 cents. It inserts can be calculated. Consciousness calculates. Personality does not deal with calculations. Why? Because it perceives everything as a cause and effect relationship. Observing a consequence, it knows the cause, meaning this is complete understanding and knowledge of the whole. And here the difference is also huge. For our consciousness, there is time. There is an understanding of the fluidity of time. For the personality, time does not exist. Well, those of you who perform practices understand what I am talking about. This is not a surprising issue. That is, when a person is in a state of deeper spiritual practice, being disconnected from consciousness, say, from its domination, then time stops. And it really stops for the person. Why? Because the personality does not have the sense of time. It does not reside in the dimension in which there is fluidity of time. Well, if one may say so. Good. Any other questions?
I don't see you. My consciousness is afraid of the eyes. All the better. I'd like to ask the following question regarding fear of death. I don't know to which extent consciousness will now let me formulate what's bothering me. It is just that in everyday life, this is the only thing that shatters my composure, and I pour out everything that I have accumulated. I can cope with everything else basically. No matter whose will I channel, I always feel it goes in a wrong direction and is not what's needed. This is so. The fear of death appears as a threat from consciousness, with wordings such as, "You will die now," or "I will kill you now," like this.
But who is speaking?
Having listened to the program Consciousness and Personality...
You have been asked who is speaking.
Anya.
No, I know that you are Anya. I am saying who is telling you this?
Well, consciousness, yes. This fear of death manifests itself, I have already understood, with the program's help, as throwing in of a picture, and primary consciousness believes it, gets frightened, and the whole chemistry process is triggered. Blood pressure, heartbeat, faints, and everything else, like this. And having watched the program, I started to trace these images and escape to a certain calm state. Everything kind of subsides, no chemistry process takes place, I'm quiet. But since recent times, another thing emerged, that is, manifestation of fear of death in everyday life. Well, it is like it has been reduced to nothing. But such things started, that I suddenly wake up at night, and it persuades me, not persuades, it says right away, this is the day of your death. And it somehow gets round all this. Well, I immediately fall for this and really believe that I will die now. Well, the body will die. Just so you understand, in the notebook, I have already died about 150 times. But as you see, I'm sitting in front of you.
This is, guys, the difference between knowledge and faith. She believes that she will die and is sitting here and telling us. She has recorded this 150 times. Whereas knowledge, this is precisely why it's good. If a doctor has said to the mortuary, it means to the mortuary. Excuse me for the inserted joke, I have understood the question. Consciousness, sunshine, it tells everyone and frightens everyone with the fear of death, meaning with despair, but it immediately rejects it itself. The difference is that some people who are easily manipulated exactly by this very hook of consciousness, they will continue to be stimulated for as long as there is this fear, meaning it's a convenient way of manipulating you, in particular for your own consciousness. Nothing but this. It is convenient for it. It has scared you. You have got frightened. Fear is what? It's an emotion. Where is your entire attention focused? On fear, right?
Yes.
What does consciousness receive?
Food.
100% of your attention. Is it convenient?
Yes.
Well, naturally, it is convenient. Will it keep scaring you? Well, it certainly will. As for whether you will die or not, well, it will surely die. Your body will die. It is mortal just like everyone else's. Pardon me, but it's a set of atoms, and there are no immortal bodies. When they say immortal people, a person cannot be immortal in the material understanding. He just can't. Consciousness is a tool. It scares, but it is not planning to die. Although once again we, going back to the state which takes place after death, I will express myself in a very simple way in this case. It is extremely beneficial for consciousness if you die of your own fears. Why is it beneficial for consciousness if you die of your own fears? Now, who will answer this question?
Subpersonality will then permanently feed with its state.
Because this means 100% subpersonality. And for consciousness, it's an opportunity to prolong its existence for an enormous period of time, right? Is it beneficial? It is. It's much better than letting a person go. That is, what does it mean to let go? To lose power over the person, and he as a personality gains a chance of liberation. What is the point here? It's bad business for consciousness. That's why it's defending itself. Let's have more questions.
We expand on the subject of authorities. Sometimes people say, no, this person is not an authority for me anymore. He is equal in sight. But consciousness still tries to make an authority of any person who has been practicing longer or something else, and not to listen to him inside yourself, but in fact to see the outward shell.
All right, guys, what is an authority? Well, let's just sort it out.
As I've understood, it's a person whom I have put above myself in terms of experience, that the person knows more than I do, and in such case there is no internal, and I no longer trust myself, but as if I trust the words of this person. Plus, when I was looking into this, well, later on I had some help too. In fact, this means then to take the place of this person, given that I have put him above myself. Envy. This is probably envy.
Envy, an example for imitation, a desire to achieve the same, whereas as a matter of fact, it's a mere crutch. That is, it's the one onto whom you can shift the responsibility for your own development, correct?
Yes.
What are all religions built upon? Let me go back to this again. One of the most grievous and dangerous things for people are the tools used, generally speaking, by all religions today. The fact is that you must obey somebody. Say, a priest has told you that you should do something this way. A priest has given you advice. You must comply with it. You must obey him. And he should be an authority for you because he is a mediator between God and the person. And without him, you will not find salvation, yes? That is, priests invented this a long time before, say, the birth of Jesus. Yet what is the trouble of all this? It is that shifting the responsibility to someone else, you do nothing yourself. And we again face what we have started with. People perform prayers in a wrong way, meaning incorrect performance of prayers, misunderstanding of these prayers. They are performed in words out of desire, but not out of feelings. In this case, it is the same. When you perceive a person, first of all, you should feel. It is a perception through feelings. But if a person does not possess such an ability, he has not developed it. At the level of consciousness, what will he be looking at? At the picture. He will listen through words. And here, consciousness will tell him whether he is an authority for you or not. So, why have I asked which of you have not blasphemed me? A simple question. Consciousness, it will always oppose, but on the other hand will want to sit near, you see? And what for? Well, what's the difference whether he's sitting near or he's sitting in his village, gosh? Just as he has been my friend, so he remains. This is not the point. Do you see what the point is? And will this influence him or what? It won't influence. If he doesn't want to evolve, he will not. If he wants, he will evolve. In the same way, this applies to you or any other person all over the world. Isn't this so? A person must do the job himself. Nobody, well, there is no such authority that can pass your spiritual path instead of you. Otherwise, there would be no point in all this. People have spoken out themselves to fight on their own, not simply to fight, but to earn salvation. Well, this is precisely the point. If a job is once begun, never leave it till it's done. Authorities, this is good. But authorities are good, let's say, in organizations of various kinds, but not in that which relates to the spiritual. Here, there is only one authority, God. At that, one should aspire, and consciousness is surely no helper here. This is true. Go ahead, Zakhar.
Igor Mikhailovich, please tell us how the result of pyramid experiment can help people in spiritual development. I mean, to expound on this subject.
The pyramid project has actually only begun, and we are still looking. I will repeat myself again. We don't have enough operators in this case. At that, to bring up an operator, a year or two are needed in order to bring up a person who is indeed working on himself, who is open to learning. This is not that simple. Moreover, we have to train them. That's why this is a long-term project. At least, well, it is planned so. And then, for everything, it's God's will, as they say. But the results which we have already obtained, what can they do? Firstly, today we can safely say that the apparatus is operational, right? That is, even in the open experiment, there is an invisible effect. The effect of what? After all, this is no suggestion. Some people try to argue, say, I have relaxed, started feeling. Well, you will feel. Well, what have you felt? That which consciousness will tell you, whereas here a distinct pattern is traceable. In 99% of cases, even more, if we look at it in mass, there are certain patterns of what people feel, how they perceive, meaning at the level of feelings. Here, we already touch upon quantum physics, right? Hence, does it work? It works. Hence, we don't know everything, even about this world, right? Not to mention that which relates to spiritual matters. And the fact that we have awakened certain, so to say, manifestations, those same skyfish, plasmoids and all the rest, and also that which we unfortunately cannot show, at least if no one has shown it before us, we're now searching whether anyone has shown those manifestations. It is clear that clergymen have spoken of this, but we need to find confirmation that somebody has shown this, filmed such things, those which we have also found. Then we will be able to show it, to repeat, and so on. We don't want to be the first. But even those facts that are already available, they prove there is also the invisible and that which seemingly is not supposed to exist, but it does exist. And this should already be pondered over. Whether it will help or not, well, what is your opinion?
It will certainly help.
It will certainly help, and exactly because it destroys those directives of that same consciousness which says this cannot exist because it cannot exist. Yet it turns out it does exist. If there is a certain remote interaction between people, this means there is much more. We don't aspire to prove that the devil exists and via his evidence to prove that God exists. No, we're following a different path, a non-religious one. We want to show that the spiritual world exists and there is God, and there is interaction between people as potential, let's say, possible parts of that world. This is better.
Can you continue the subject in the context of physics a little? I'm interested in the following point. How, from the perspective of primordial physics, the theory which the Har was telling about in the video, is effect through feelings taking place, and does it relate to physics at all, meaning that which is described in the report? How does effect through feelings take place? Or is it only influence on the structure, namely on the front essence? Could this subject be somehow expanded?
In this case, in this experiment, influence was exerted precisely on the structure. This is indeed so, but the very fact that effect was coming from a person from within the machine, and people perceived it at the level of feelings upon their own structures, they clearly gave definitions how it worked for them. Why? There is differentiation here, types 1, 2, 3, 4, and again there is differentiation as to what was prevailing in a person before he started this experiment. At that, in the subsequent experiments, those changed. But if they are traced, everything could be told even about this person, what he describes, in which state he was, and what he is, and why. Yet, what does this confirm once again? That it turns out a human being has, besides a physical body, also some energy structure which interacts. And these structures are capable of interacting with each other. And if we recall the Allatra book, yes, then, for instance, if we think of another person, an interaction between us takes place. Well, let's say we have thought nicely or kindly about a person whom we haven't seen for a long time. That person has felt the same and recalled us. We have neither seen nor called each other for 10 years, have just recalled, had a thought, and here is a call. Here is an answer for you why this takes place. How may this be called? This may be called those same gifts that come from God in service, in prayer, in seclusion. When people earn these gifts through great labor. At that, simply speaking, guys, if we cast away all these rituals, you should indeed work on yourselves, meaning there are certain tools that should be studied, and then you will have these gifts, but they must not be used as magic, meaning they should be studied as tools for spiritual self-development, for exploring this world and for understanding. Is this work? Well, it is certainly work. This experiment, first and foremost, has confirmed that all this does exist. Yet, pardon me, we know this, but this is needed for those who don't know. This is needed for awareness of those people who have doubts about everything, even about themselves, you see, for those who live by the evil, who live under the dictatorship of consciousness. Whereas this will show and say a little that, guys, well, there is something you don't know. Then you see, a person has settled down, become thoughtful, at least has trained his brain and started investing the power of his attention in those thoughts which he needs, and not in everyday things. And you behold, he has started understanding something. A desire has arisen to learn something. A desire, I emphasize. He has started learning, and then perceptions through feelings has come, correct? And later on, maybe, he has gained a chance, and the spiritual world has not lost its potential participant, let's say. This is good. We give a chance, and then people already see for themselves. If they want, they perceive. If they don't want, they don't. Why did I say during the experiment that for people who consider themselves spiritual, this is a chance to test their spirituality? Because very many people, let's say, being dictated by consciousness, perceive themselves almost as angels already, as saints. And this is precisely that very tool for cognition. When a person, while turning on a simple experiment, is sitting there and feels nothing except evil and hatred, that is what is being told to him in his head, and he criticizes everyone. Well, first of all, him, and me, that's a given, but him because he is sitting there. I mean, Andrei. Well, what kind of spirituality can we talk about here? Whereas a spiritual person, what does he possess? Those same gifts, meaning the freedom of perception, the contact with each other at a distance, well, and all the rest. Those miracles which are described, these are not miracles, guys. These are, well, who will say running is a miracle? It's not a miracle, it's a natural ability. And all this is also a natural ability, that which you should possess. Why should you? Once again, in order to explore this world, in order for you not to be controlled by the system, in order to breathe freely, not with lungs, not the air, well, as it is called, to breathe God's love. Go ahead.
Igor Mikhailovich, such an opinion has also been formed that in a 1 hour stay in this pyramid of ours, it allows a person, so to say, to gain a certain spiritual experience. Or something more than that. Please, explain from the perspective that this is just an interaction between one material structure and another taking place, meaning that it doesn't affect personality, the choice of personality itself.
Yet I disagree with you. Does it affect the choice of personality?
Because if
It does. Well, let's consider this from such a perspective. Again, two material structures interact, but one suppresses dominance of the other one, meaning our consciousness. It is first and foremost set to enslaving personality and controlling it. But when consciousness loses power over personality, what does the personality gain? Freedom. And for the first time, the person can, while sitting in that same pyramid, with Tori having been properly configured, experience freedom from one's consciousness. Many who participate in experiments, they feel how thoughts move away, retreat, and he begins to understand that he is not thoughts, that he is not consciousness. This is the initial experience which he can gain. Does it help?
it helps,
Is it a spiritual experience?
spiritual experience.
If the person perceives and develops it, will this accelerate the process of his spiritual evolution?
Definitely.
Of course, but the issue is different, that having got out of it and forgotten this, and having started thinking of other things, or of those metaphysical phenomena like the one Andrei showed, yes, if the person starts thinking so, I emphasize, the person starts thinking so, clearly it's his consciousness, and that the freedom he has gained an instant ago, he has immediately lost, and the dictatorship of consciousness has returned to him, and he has accepted it. Has this helped him? Well, it has helped in no way. He has slipped into magic and the desire to exploit the spiritual powers, which are given for gaining freedom, gaining life, so as to turn oneself into subpersonality, meaning he himself pushes himself into hell or into the pit of tar, as they write. Well, what's the point then? Certainly, in such case, it won't help a person. But this is the choice of personality. Even the system, it doesn't force. It creates conditions, but the choice is made by personality. Yet, due to the fact that, ironically enough, almost the entire population of the globe does not know their personalities, this is really the situation of today, meaning people don't know what personality is. Personality regards itself as consciousness. Well, here I am personality, I am matter, I am the body, I think, therefore I exist, and I am personality. But this is not a personality. Personality is precisely that which emerges in deep prayer practices, real, correct ones, while at perception through feelings, when there is only love, when there is a natural fusion, well, speaking in the earthly language, with God's world, when there is manifestation of the spiritual, real manifestation within a person himself, inside, in the depth, not somewhere outside. If a person feels something outside, all this is the system. All these are again the tricks of consciousness. When there is this internal state, deep, genuine, it cannot be confused with anything. When a person gains freedom, when all thoughts rebound like Satan from God, that is what real spiritual experience is. Yet can this be preserved? It can be. But if a person does not preserve and loses it right away, well, this is his choice. But anyway, it's a chance. At that, a person gains the same experience for the first time. Let's assume in that very pyramid after he returns. If he wants to develop this, he can do it. Is it good? Bad? Who knows whether it's good or bad? Time will show. We will see. More questions?
Igor Mikhailovich, I have just noticed that the thing is that I trivially confuse who am I. And as in the example with the chocolate bar, which you talked about, well, in fact, it's not even me who is eating the chocolate bar.
Of course, not you.
But the habit. But the habit is since childhood. Well, watching programs with your participation, reading the Allatra book, all that give a response at the level of feelings and really practices, they, well, I cannot say that there is no spiritual because I feel and...
But you can't say there is spiritual because you don't know.
But during the day, I simply confused where am I and where is consciousness. And because of this, I kind of transmit its will. And it lives. But after all, in fact, that's simple. Because it's not even me who is working. I'm not the programmer. It is consciousness, the programmer. Well, the question is, who am I? And
do you know what the funniest thing is? The funniest thing is to hear this from a person who is involved in programming. And you said the key phrase, it is not I who lives. Yes, meaning you're not living at this time. And what's the point? The point is just that if a person really has a desire to live, he lives. I mean, to live spiritually free, if this is his main goal. And when a person has a multitude of dominant desires, well, due to certain circumstances of life and the like, there are desires that are intrusive, that dominate in the head for a much longer time, meaning a person cannot make his consciousness even think about the spiritual, or is compelled to force it. That's when this happens. Do you understand? But in fact, everything is very simple. When you put the power of attention into work, you are focused on this work. You are integrated into consciousness, and the personality ceases to identify itself as a personality. Why? Because it got used to this since childhood. And in this you are right, and it wants the chocolate. But again, who wants?
Consciousness.
Consciousness. What does the personality, for example, need your chocolate for, right? Or candy? Of course it does not. It does not need anything material. That's the point. But when a person lives spiritually and really strives for it, for real freedom, the one which people have struggled for since time immemorial, after all, everyone is fighting for freedom. Well, what do they achieve by changing one dictator for another? Nothing. Any freedom in a society is an illusion. True freedom is the freedom in spiritual sense, when a person really gains it, and that's exactly where life begins, right? Meaning that which does not have time, and it does not end, and it has to be constant. And well, thanks to certain practices, efforts, studies and the like, working on oneself, prayers, those same grains in any religion, say no matter what religion a person is in, there are a lot of grains on how to really find it all. But there is a lot of chaff which led astray to the opposite side. But if a person wants to live, if he has experienced, felt that he is a personality, he just must not lose it. It should be like that all the time, whatever you do. Observe how your consciousness works, what it is doing, and so on. But if you observe secondary consciousness with the help of primary consciousness, well, it is better, of course, than nothing. But primary consciousness easily substitutes the personality at this stage of observation, making it manipulate. Well, this can be easily differentiated too. I will put it simpler. Life is, first and foremost, love. It is filling up with true, genuine love. But the concepts of love, even for people, it is a big difference. It's not a secret, but people do not know what love is. What we call love is attachment, it's manipulation, it's the convenience of survival, it's comfort. Well, call it whatever you want, but this can't be called love. Love is the ultimate understanding. It is that. But the words end on how to describe it, what love is. Love is when there is happiness, inner happiness. It's real life, it's freedom. We can associate love, it is happiness with internal freedom, an immense one. It is that which erases all boundaries and eliminates all fears. Then there can be neither fear of death of the body nor anything else, because the person gains an understanding that he cannot die. But it only comes when, again, when he gets freedom. And he gets freedom only when his main goal in his life is to find this aspiration. And when he is focused on life, well, so let's say then he finds it, meaning when most of the forces given for the acquisition of life are spent on acquiring life. But if we put all the forces of attention as dictated by our own consciousness, due to our own habit, into a certain work, no matter how complex it may be, of course we forget about ourselves. We become, we move around. That is, again, quantum laws work here. And we just substitute ourselves. We substitute ourselves for consciousness, and we already become one of the actors in our head, no more, who enter into a dispute with themselves, and there is already no differentiation, but inside it is empty. And this is inner unity. It is the inner content and the integrity, say spiritually, it is precisely that love, that internal freedom. It is what gives this life. And it cannot disappear anywhere, whatever you do. No matter how hard a person's life is, no matter how much pain and suffering he experiences, the personality, it is free. It has nothing to do with the body. It's like a bird in a cage. Well, this is so there is understanding. But that's when you gain this. But in order for this to happen, you have to get there. You need to gain this freedom.
And can we say that this is the same as like a certain number of years? We develop the habit of living by consciousness, that the same way we can, observing ourselves, observing...
Develop a habit to live?
Yes.
No, there can't be a habit of living. It's a need. But this must be realized, that the personality has this need. Well, consciousness does everything so that you do not understand that personality is striving for life. It should develop in the same way as everything else. That is, I mean, the personality itself. Adapt to that same freedom and, of course, learn how to properly distribute the power of attention. Let's say it simply.
So this means that without such a primary awareness of this need, of the real, there will be no...
Honesty. Everything begins with honesty. With honesty towards yourself. You can lie to anyone, a friend, a mate. You will describe yourself as whatever you want to be, but not who you actually are. But with yourself, you must be absolutely honest at every stage. If you are too lazy to write down your observations, admit that you are a lazy person, that you do not want anything, and that you are now engaged in foolishness. And here, consciousness is pressuring that the subsequent state, this is not fears, not intimidation, it is reality. A sub-personality is inevitable after death, if a person is not liberated spiritually. They really exist. You can conduct a lot of experiments and tests. Well, no need to even go far. To observe and listen to what people are experiencing, say, who have experienced clinical death. Well, here everything may be analyzed, and from the position of science it can be easily proved, you see? It's inevitable. And here you should think what you want in the future. What is your choice? An instant gratification by a chocolate or something greater? You see, here is a substitution of values, and the most important values, life-defining values. Reality is substituted by an illusion. That's the whole point here. Meaning, true love is replaced by such substitutes, and sugar is substituted by God knows what. Well, you see how much it does not fit in. Well, it's even hard to express in order to explain this all here. Do you understand? That love, that life which a person finds, and to exchange it here for something, well, there is nothing which it can be exchanged for. Really nothing. All the rest, well, it's values imposed by consciousness. You see? Well, ground-sounding values. Maybe they are heroic and the like, or are associated with responsibility, with something else, but these are all false values. A person can have nothing here, and he cannot possess anything that would be much more valuable than real life. Well, even when a person experiences in practices, whether it is prayerful ones, meditative or religious, it does not matter. But when a person encounters, and people often face this divine spiritual manifestation with a droplet of Allatra, he experiences that which penetrates, as they say, to the depth of the soul. But can anything in this world produce a similar experience? Here, even such a small experience, it shows how everything is worthless in the material world in comparison with the spiritual world. But a person, after all, without any experience, he is just this... You know, this is when there is a strong wind, there's a wave, and you are far, far away from the shore, but a drop from the ocean has hit you. Well, I would compare like that, and you have an opportunity to settle in this ocean and become a part of this ocean. And to reject this, to exchange for the mortal, it's hard to understand. It's like people doom themselves to such existence here. Well, let's say like some, as a consequence of trauma or illness, get to a point where they're immobilized, consciousness works, and you cannot even move an eye. Do you understand? Whereas consciousness is working, you hear everything, you perceive everything, but your body does not obey. Well, imagine this state. We once talked about organizing and making this kind of a video to talk with those people who came out of these conditions, like after a stroke, or those who have been in a coma, so that people understand a little how hard it is. And this is somewhere close to the state of subpersonality, meaning there is freedom of consciousness, but there is enormous helplessness, while emotions are all preserved. Everything that is there in everyday life is preserved, only the body does not obey, and desires, everything remains. That very pressure, say aggression from that same consciousness, it remains. And to exchange happiness, eternity for elusiveness? It is hard to express this. Let's have another question. Let's drop this topic, it is said.
During the day and in practices, even when there is a contact with the spiritual world and with feelings, still I personally give the significance to the imagery of this world and all these pictures. How can I escape from them? You talked a lot in the program, in the movie Consciousness and Personality, about images and about perception through feelings. Well, the difference, how maybe expand on this topic a bit more. Because for me personally, it is difficult to escape from this illusory, that is from the three-dimension perception of this world, from pictures.
To get away from images. The question is, as I understand, how to get rid of images while performing practices, right?
Yes.
Do not perform them with consciousness. And that's all. After all, when you are performing practices, what is the point of practices? It is to come to perception through feelings, meaning our personality does not have the ability to think like consciousness. It perceives everything in another way. It perceives holistically, it perceives comprehensively and is detached from this world. But this is scary for consciousness. It interferes in any meditative practice, in prayers for believers and the like. It intrudes in everyone's spiritual practices. And the point is just to get rid of thoughts while performing spiritual practices, meaning to get rid of consciousness, go to perception through feelings. This is easy. And again, we're back to that same pyramid. Right, Zahar? That the first experience which a person gains is very valuable. One can spend years to experience this one time, but thereafter it's very easy because after gaining this experience, one has something to be guided by. But it is also very easy to lose this experience, even having received it, meaning, once again, having gone under the power. Why? Because we are in three-dimensionality. We are under the power of consciousness, the system and the like, meaning we are, well, we can say, almost in hell. It is easy to lose these skills too by shifting the power of attention not there where one should. Now, when you start listening to thoughts, weighing and assessing your spiritual practice, this is the first mistake everyone makes. You're trying to evaluate what you are feeling now. Who in you is trying to evaluate, sunshine? Isn't it so? Are you doing it well or poorly? Who dictates this? Quality performance of a prayer or meditation. And does God hear it? Here, for believers, here I'm praying. I'm trying now with all my might. Does God hear me or not? Consciousness dictates. God hears, yes, but this is not the God you are striving for. This is the earthly God, that is the system or the one called the devil. He does hear at this moment, and the spiritual world will be neutral. Why neutral? Because it does not hear. Because there is no contact in this case with it. And here there must be purity. And is it difficult? Absolutely not difficult. It's easier than you can imagine. So when you guys achieve this, they wonder why others do not understand, forgetting that they have spent years themselves. Well, how can one not perceive it? It's so easy. Well, it's easy, yes, of course, when you know. It's like walking. While you're learning, it's difficult, and it's very simple once you have learned. You walk and do not think how you walk, or to swim, right? When people do not know how to swim, it seems to be so difficult for them. He got into the water, felt at a loss, thoughts and all that, and starts to sink. Why does he start to sink? After all, each of us has a swimming reflex. What is the trouble here or the reason? The reason is exactly in the work of consciousness, therefore the spiritual practice. And even more, when a person is trying to immerse in a meditative, prayerful practice, well, exactly to reach perception through feelings, will he manage to do it with consciousness? He will never manage it. For consciousness, it is like antimatter. The spiritual world, consciousness will not survive there. This is alien for it. So it will do everything to resist, just to not get into the oven. Next question.
About spiritual maturity and spiritual responsibility. The question is probably more about priorities and the value of time.
Let's say responsibility is when a person indeed steps on the spiritual path, meaning he steps at the level of consciousness, he cannot step there at the level of, say, personality. After all, the person comes to understand that he feels something, that it's his need, that it is necessary for him, and he realizes this. And he steps on the spiritual path. And here, the most important thing is certainly responsibility, honesty and responsibility towards oneself. Then consciousness also gets into such inconvenient conditions for it, when it is forced to admit what it used to deny before. And this way, the person clears his way to the spiritual world. Responsibility is very important. Everything begins with this. What else with? Honesty and responsibility.
At that, the priority of the value of time is that you set yourself. Now, it is necessary to study psychology and physics. Is it important to set priorities for oneself, or is there actually an inner understanding of what should be studied?
Well, I would say your priority should not be psychology and physics, while those are a necessity. At that, necessary things are performed, well, just like everything else necessary, right? According to capabilities and needs. Whereas there should only be one priority. Yet from this, even from such thinking, everything begins. Meaning we are accustomed to think, say, in the beginning, do you remember, I have picked on the word on how everything is twisted, and everything is built on such trifles. That is, there should be a complete perception, then everything evens out. Any more questions, guys?
Igor Mikhailovich, in the program Consciousness and Personality from the Inevitably Dead to the Eternally Alive, you said that learning the system with the help of consciousness, the system, will not allow such learning.
Of course.
And will resist in every way possible. And the fact that a more scientific trend is now being developed, scientific, right? And it seems to me that maybe please share what one should do, how to reside in, study the system, yes?
To study the system, residing in the system itself, it is impossible to learn it, but it should be studied precisely there. Do you understand? That is, what we are trying to do, say, to perform certain experiments, something else, the processes of observation. Say, people try to observe their thoughts, what the system tells, how they react to certain, let's say, situations, what their consciousness tells them. They take this and record. Then, while reading, they're horrified by the fact that these thoughts could have come to them. After all, they're so good, while thoughts are not very good, you see? This is exactly learning of the system while you're inside of it. But you can really learn the system only when you're beyond it. But when you're beyond it, already beyond the system, then you have a holistic perception of everything. It is very simple. It's not difficult at all. Well, and the need to study kind of disappears. Well, here such a paradox is observed. Yes?
May I ask another question? In practices from time to time, I manage to escape from the body, from consciousness. That is, when there is such an impression that personality, it breaks away from the body and consciousness.
It identifies oneself.
Yes, and this moment you feel such happiness, such a familiar, intimate feeling. You even as if don't understand where you know it from, but you understand that this feeling, it is very near and dear. But this rarely happened in practices, and I would like to, that is, I want to sort it out for myself, to understand. That is, this is like the moment when personality breaks away from primary consciousness, from the body, from that...
Quite right. This is the first experience of gaining freedom, or the initial experience of creation of life. At that, well, who other than consciousness prevents you from keeping it permanently? Having got out of practice, getting back into this world again, consciousness automatically switches on, right? And it tells you that it's impossible to experience all this, to feel and at the same time to reside in this world. It is impossible to live and to be in this world.
Yes, simply does not understand yet what the state is. It is as if...
And consciousness will never understand or perceive it.
As a personality, you do feel and understand.
A personality knows, while consciousness cannot understand this. Therefore, everything possible arises, even directed denial. Consciousness may even start telling one that it's not normal, but at the same time, consciousness functions normally.
Yes.
At that, what you feel as a personality, and here one can hear, consciousness even begins to curse sometimes, whereas in some cases, well, and some people do experience this, and thank God, rather often now, when literally, openly, even in an unusual voice, it sounds in one's head even quiet. Well, how to express this? Rudely and indecently. These are direct contacts. When the system already begins to contact, it's already, well, driven into a corner and does not know how to force a person back in place.
Somehow such effective, such ways, like this state, well, in order to break away from this primary consciousness. Maybe there are some, I don't know, it turns out that precisely spiritual practices are the most effective way to escape, right?
Honesty and decency first and foremost. And in this case, you are trying to find a magic pill without going through the path to achieve the top spots. Well, this does not happen so. You understand, the mountaintop may be conquered only by climbing it, while you want to jump there from a helicopter. It's not the same thrill, believe me. Here, nothing artificial may take place. A person must earn, he must endeavor, he must attain, he must begin to live, he must desire it, he must strive for it. Then it will come. And he, let's say, in this case must, having overcome himself, stop listening to his consciousness. So it denies, it curses, but the person keeps moving because he feels this is the truth. Then he indeed starts gaining those same gifts, to understand more, and with the help of his own observation of what consciousness is doing, more and more he begins to be convinced of his rightness as of a free personality, or of a potentially free being. And then he already ceases to be a potentially free personality and becomes a free one. Well, there is no other way, guys. This is a fight, an Armageddon. What else can you do? You should fight. And in this way, well, in extremely rare cases, it is so easy and simple. Sometimes people are lucky, some deserve this, and some, well, simply have such a gift from birth. But as a rule, everything goes through sufferings, torments, through self-exploration, self-remorse, through struggle, through rejection, through sufferings. Well, again, it's not a personality that suffers and torments itself. It is consciousness. It is fighting for its power. At that, in everyday life, look, aren't you fighting for your power? You are fighting. Even with your dear and near ones you fight. Here is where everything begins, with admission of elementary things, that first and foremost, you live as an animal, but aspire to become a human. If there is such an aspiration, then you can in fact become a human. Yet if there is a single aspiration to become the coolest animal, then you should not think of a spiritual at all. What do you need it for? Then, just like we have said, shift your responsibility to someone else, and they will pray for you. And revel in this hope, right? Why strain yourself?
May also about... There's such an observation in the program. It was said that in order to understand how to live, we must fight at first. And so I have fought, have understood how to live. And then there is an understanding of how to stay in feelings. But this understanding and simple daily work on myself, this gradually slides into laziness. And there is such a situation that there is... This internal state, it dissipates, and consciousness imposes an illusion that in order to regain it, I must again fight with consciousness, study the system, study its patterns.
One of the forms of manipulation of human by consciousness is that very laziness. I'll start on Monday, that's it. I'll start seriously working on myself on Monday. That's it. I'm starting a notebook. I'm starting to write things down. I'm starting to track myself. But on Monday comes, well, there is no time. There is too much to do. I will finish now and start performing spiritual practices. Then I'll start. You will never start. The issue is that you are engaged in self-deception or suicide, simply put. But this is suicide, you must admit. But why? And again, what are we coming to? You have to be honest with yourself. Who is to control whom? Is your consciousness to control you, or are you to control it?
I, as the personality, am to control my consciousness.
Then what's the problem?
In my case, the problem is that I can't yet identify that very edge where there is...
Who is speaking now?
Well, consciousness, yes, it can't identify.
Here is the answer for you. and it will control you for your entire life until you become a sub-personality. I'm not scaring you, I'm telling the truth. For as long as you listen to I can't, it cannot, it will never be able to, but you can, you really can. Use the fact that you can, or do not use. One can be engaged in the spiritual, or one can live by it. If you do not start living, you will be engaged in it all your life, and all your life you will be manipulated, but you will strive to be spiritual. This is noble. In any case, you will do less harm to others when you're striving, right? Well, there is a plus there too. Well, this is that same religion, but not gaining of true freedom. Okay, guys, does anyone have any questions?
About the experiment with the pyramid. Should we have closed our eyes or not when Andrei got inside?
As you like, but with your eyes closed. I will explain. We turn off the perception of vision, and it is better to perceive with feelings. Why? Because eyes are a very powerful stimulus of our consciousness. It is harder to feel something with your eyes open without experience.
I have a question too. In practice, I worked with the front essence. I had a feeling that I did not just feel the front essence, but I felt another self, only the real one. Well, I felt...
This is consciousness.
Is this consciousness?
It is clearly consciousness. It forms an object that is separate. Perception of the front essence through feelings is a certain emotion. At first, it feels like... Well, let's say that person cannot feel the skin. You can't call it an obstacle either. It's just something positive, good, located in front. That is again, first of all, when this practice is being performed. This is a perception through feelings and emotional perception. We should differentiate here. Still, the front essence, it is perceived more by, say, experience through feelings. Why? Because if the left, right, back, they are perceived more emotionally, then the front more through feelings. That's how it differs. And when another person is formed, like a clone or something else, then, well, it's not quite so. Here consciousness plays a role.
Thank you.
Any more questions, guys?
Igor Mikhailovich, going back to the question of deviating from perception through images and transition to perception through feelings, right? In the program, it was said that when a person is in the state of perception through feelings, he can perceive information directly through field structures. Does this refer to essences?
Of course.
And please, explain the connection of essences with primary and secondary consciousness. Do they somehow interact there?
Surely, they do indeed. And what is consciousness? Consciousness is a field structure in the first place. And here we come back again to our pyramid, to our experiments and to the heart. One of the tasks that faces us is to experimentally demonstrate that our consciousness is, after all, located outside of our cranium. It is exactly above it. That is, by activating the fifth, sixth torus, we impede the work of primary consciousness. By activating the first four tori, we impede the work of secondary consciousness. When this happens in the majority of people who are not even trained, but who can nevertheless at least tune to perception without activating their consciousness, then we can confirm all this experimentally. Isn't this interesting?
Yes, very much so. And I want to clarify here, primary consciousness, it turns out, is between the top of the pyramid and the base, right? In this gap. And the secondary one, it turns out, is somewhere...
Above the top.
Above the top.
Yes. By the way, there is an interesting experiment, but we will not conduct it. But maybe someone is interested. Having access to medical devices, say to that same EEG, it would be possible to make such measurements when a person is watching the experiment. He is in a calm state, is simply in a calm state, and then an experiment with the pyramid. Is there a difference or not on the encephalogram? It's also interesting to see and to conduct such kind of an experiment on several interested people, and it will be possible to draw certain conclusions. It's also interesting.
What may we know now about 4 types of personality in terms of what may help people?
In general, these types can change in connection with the development of a person himself. The first type is a person who is almost completely under the control of consciousness. The second type is a person who is close to the first, but in transition between the first and the third, with small gleams. The third type is a person who is able to feel, perceive everything, develops quite well in the spiritual sense. And the fourth type is exactly those lucky ones whom I spoke about, who can very easily, without much resistance from consciousness, cognize spiritual development.
Thank you.
Any more questions, guys?
And can it be that it is not consciousness that is activated, but the system? It's just that I have been observing such manifestations in myself recently.
Can't hear you very well.
Recently, I've observed in myself such manifestations when consciousness simply overwhelms me. Not as usual, meaning some kind of wild manifestation that is a very strong one. I got an impression that this is the system.
But consciousness is in fact the system.
Well, I understand, yes, but there is, as it were, a more or less tamed consciousness, or as...
A usual state of consciousness, and it can be very active at times. But as a rule, the activation of consciousness arises in response to some attempt of spiritual development. Say you have tried to perform a spiritual practice, or allowed something like perception through feelings, well, and in response received a hello from consciousness, or from the system through consciousness. It activates immediately and starts to suppress. This can manifest itself at the level of consciousness, or it can manifest itself in everyday life just as well. People often encounter that. Began to feel something started to go well, and then suddenly everyone in the family got crazy. Everyone is calling, everyone is anxious, everyone is somehow angry and trying to get you out of this spiritually relaxed state in every possible way. Let's put it like that. Well, who has not encountered this? Only the one who did not work on oneself. This is normal. But a person has to pass these guards. How can it be otherwise?
This happened to me when the pyramid experiment began. I also wanted to ask about this. I see very obvious manifestations of consciousness, the desire for magic. I just want to get into this pyramid. It wants to get its hands on it, very obviously, here.
But there is nothing special there.
Well, yes, I understand. And nevertheless, I have such a question. Is it not simply a trick of consciousness? It's just that in this case, if it obviously wants magic, and if there is this...
But you mustn't engage in magic. Let's just say the same metaphysics is not magic. Many things can be studied and learned through science. The question is, what is your attitude towards it? If it tells you to acquire or master certain abilities or capabilities, to gain some possibilities in order to rise above other people, it is disastrous. Whereas if the purpose is cognition or serving, then it's different. Do you understand? Well, everything is also...
It is not only about magic, it is also about power.
Well, power? Who does not want power? Whose consciousness does not want power? Well, tell me, everyone is fighting for power. Let's take a simple example. The most united family, they have lived together for 70 years, for example, happy, in love their whole life. Why? Because they have balanced their power over each other. Absolutely correct.
It's just what I wanted to ask you. It seemed to me that the trick on the part of consciousness is to make it...
Tell your name out loud, so that they will know on TV if you will run for election, not to vote for you. Just kidding.
To make it so that I wouldn't participate in this experiment, meaning there were simply very strong manifestations there. I didn't observe anything like that in myself before.
And now take a look. You've gained experience. On the one hand, there was an opening of perception through feelings, and on the other hand, activation of consciousness, even of the system through consciousness that pushes you and says, go and get magic. And on the other hand, an understanding, if you take part in this experiment, you can understand something greater. So what pushes you to go there? And how does consciousness act in this case?
It's an interesting question. I can't figure it out so far.
And I'll explain it to you. What then is so interesting here? Cast away everything that's unnecessary and look at this situation from the side. You took part in the experiment. You got experience, felt something. And here, consciousness began to tell you that it can be used as an instrument for attainment of power, as acquisition of some magical abilities. But on the other hand, you want to take part in the experiment in the pyramid itself, but you're afraid because consciousness tells you that you can acquire some magical abilities. Consciousness must do this in order to prevent you from entering it, meaning it is the greatest manipulator.
Do nothing.
Do you understand? That is, this way it excludes you from this process, so that you would not feel more and could not perceive more. Who knows, maybe in the future you will be an excellent operator, and we have a problem with operators. We cannot find them. Anything might happen. And the question is not what your consciousness strives for. Consciousness of any person strives for magic and power, but what you strive for as a personality, what dominates in you in reality. Do you understand? This is important. And you should not be afraid of anything, except of becoming a sub-personality.
Thank you.
The line between freedom of choice and permissiveness. How to always observe. Sometimes it manipulates with it. Well, like...
Permissiveness, this concept can't exist at all. It doesn't exist even in this world, you see. And freedom of choice, it does exist. It's the law. A person may choose life or may choose death. This is the greatest freedom that he has in reality. Therefore, the line between here is huge, life or death.
Igor Mikhailovich, I have a question about the proximity of that world. A droplet which is brought by the wind to the ocean. Well, and it's just that I have noticed so many times how consciousness tells how far this ocean is. But on the other hand, well, you quoted Quran that Allah is closer than carotid artery. What have I noticed? That at these moments I begin to believe consciousness, and either there is not enough counter-argumentation or experience, and so it happens that I believe that it is far.
Well, naturally, because you live by consciousness. Now, cast away all of your ambitions carefully and take an honest look at yourself from outside. What do you live by in everyday life? In a pile of insults, envy, and all kinds of dirt, isn't it right? It is. And what do you dream of becoming? Where do you want to be? You want to become at least like him. So swap places and sit down. Well, you're just a bit more hairy, shave a little and that's it. What's the difference? Well, the years will fly by quickly. What are you striving for? Tell me. You say you believe. Who are you in this case? After all, you understand that this is consciousness and you have the experience of what personality is. And do you understand what choice you make and who you serve? Here is an answer for you. You knowingly, as a personality, betray yourself due to the fears that your consciousness imposes on you, because of temptations, and makes you act wrong in relation towards yourself, giving you the hope that here, in this world, you can acquire something and become someone. Well, and how is that working out? Not happy with what you have? You will never be satisfied with what you have, believe me. There is not a single person who would be satisfied with what has been achieved in this world. It's true. The one who says, I'm happy with everything, well, that means he has just received it. We will wait a little, time will pass, and he will be dissatisfied with what he has received. As one of my acquaintances said, whichever yacht you have bought, there will always be someone who has a bigger one. Meaning, a person cannot achieve what he wants in this world. It's true. So what do we come to again? To honesty. And why aren't you honest with yourself? You listen to consciousness, which tells you that the ocean is far away. It can't be far. It is much closer than your consciousness. But consciousness is more active. Why does this happen? Because it is active. It wants to eat, while the spiritual world is self-sufficient. It does not need, say, to eat you. It will be glad when you come, but if you don't come, it's the freedom of choice. It's your right. It's your choice. This is the point. What's the problem? Nothing except for consciousness. I'm sorry for being straightforward, but this way it will be more comprehensible. Guys, more questions?
May I?
You may. But do you need to?
I will try to formulate it in a way that is understandable. In the day, fear usually pulls me out of perception through feelings, meaning it blocks this perception through feelings, and this issue began to worry me very much. And I decided to figure it out, to monitor all these connections. And I realized that most often in the day some obvious attacks of emotion from the side of the structure occur as a proposal, meaning I feel and observe this choice, the moment of choice, that I can disagree with this reaction and very quickly retreat from attacks. Yet, precisely fear, in particular, it is agitation. Anxiety, it is precisely inside. It is felt as a bursting from the inside, straight from the solar plexus. Naturally, I try to get out of this situation in various ways, and most often I dive inside myself in any situation as a general rule. But here it turns out when I direct attention inward, there is this lamp of fear there, and I realize that there is just this fact that I do not work hard enough on myself, and I don't have this experience.
An accusation. Now see how interesting this is? Sorry, I'll interrupt. I've understood the question. Let's start with the first one. Why does a person experience feelings of fear exactly in the solar plexus area, only a little higher, or pressure in this area? We told of the silver thread that the soul, yes, it is there, say in the diaphragm area, if you look at the structure. And personality, it is actually much higher above the head. We only perceive it when we're subjectively relaxed, as something in the head, only it's unclear where, but this is if we try to analyze with the help of our consciousness. And why precisely is it that when you try to dive inside, as you say, yes, meaning to go deeper, approach the area of, say, the solar plexus, you feel a lump of fear there? What's causing this? Soul and personality, they're connected by the so-called silver thread. When an attack from consciousness or attack from the animal nature is taking place, then there is activation of the septons that surround this stream. And this may be compared to such a septon tube, through which a very thin stream of energy passes. And so, when the activation increases, it gets compressed. Such a stricture formation or narrowing of this channel happens. And here a feeling of fear appears, a feeling of being squeezed right here in this area. And when approaching, you will precisely feel it all. What is the reason for this? The work of consciousness. Again, if we analyze everything that you've said, then we clearly see the program, clearly see the work of consciousness and directives exactly from consciousness, which get in your way.
So, I began to work hard on the Chatveric meditation. And then there was such, generally speaking, consciousness just does not allow me to observe. It means primary consciousness cannot observe the secondary one.
Sunshine, here already a woe from wit begins, meaning too much power of attention is put into one's own consciousness, into observation of the observer over the observed. What is needed? To relax. When you observe and when it doesn't let you, this means it is an obvious directive from consciousness. Nobody can interfere, well, just can't interfere. Why? Because consciousness is information. All other reactions are reactions that occur at the level of the body, at the level of everything. This is a consequence of implementation of this information. This is so you understand. Consciousness can't force, and the system can't force you to make one or another choice as a personality. But you put the power of attention into this program, and you implement it. You and no one else. You as a personality can implement it. And the whole trick of your consciousness is to deceive you as a personality and to draw you into this process of observation and self-resistance. But why? I say again, consciousness is information. We take a computer, we open it, we look for socks, and we are given Christmas trees in summer. Well, why do you unfold these Christmas trees and start looking? Meaning, you open it and start looking at Christmas trees. You are indignant that you cannot find socks. You have to go out in 2 hours. And you're wasting time on Christmas trees. But you are doing it yourself, right?
Right.
Understand?
Yes. It's just that there is this situation, that a reaction arises in the body during meditation and...
For sure.
Yes, and I realize that this is really a program, and there is this understanding. But how to get away from this? I don't have an understanding. I have no such experience.
But who is asking? Here again, it is as in that same question. At this moment, how to get away from this, it is consciousness that's asking. After all, you know how to get away from this at the level of personality. Everything is simple. Do not activate those very programs with Christmas trees, meaning do not give, do not put the power of attention into things that you don't need, and that's all. It's very simple, guys. Yes, colorful pictures. Yes, colorful all sorts of, let's say, temptations that come in and unfold at the level of primary consciousness. But as soon as we put the power of attention there, they start to come alive. They gain three-dimensionality in our head. Until then, they are two-dimensional. At the level of two-dimensionality, eliminate whatever it offers you and whatever it gives you if you do not need it, and nothing will happen. There will be no fear. There will be no impossibilities to perform that same spiritual practice or anything. There will be no intrusive ideas. This is, you know, it's like spam filtering. It came and got sent into the spam folder, that's all, and didn't even touch you. See how easy it is to explain now, right? Thank God. Although it is a tool of the system that is obliged to perform its function very well, this is again enslavement of personality. I mean, that same internet and that same computer technology. Why? Because there is huge information load, especially on the youth, on the future generation. It fulfills its function. Why? Because in young people, maybe someone has observed this, clip thinking appears. They cannot perceive more than 4 lines of text. They cannot watch a program which is longer than 5 minutes, meaning they immediately get frustrated. Everything has to be brief, superficial for them. Putting in attention, they are very emotional. Well, this is the result of technology development. This is convenient for the system, but as personalities they lose in this case. It will be more difficult for them, if there is this future for them. Let's move on.
Meaning discipline, the discipline of primary consciousness as a spam, enabling spam filtering. This is the discipline of primary consciousness, so as to...
No, this is the discipline of the personality, first of all, of yourself as a personality. Stay away from Christmas trees when you need socks. Here, you opened the internet, meaning you woke up in the morning. You know what you need to do. Do it. Do not talk with the actors in your head about what you don't need at all. How much time do you spend on this, honestly?
A lot of time.
Yes, I will not talk about those thoughts that get into your head, well, indecent ones, let's say. But even the decent ones, which you don't need at all, they take up 80% of your time. What for? A simple question. Of the remaining 20%, how much time do you spend on work? And how much time do you spend on spiritual self-contemplation? Here's the answer to all your problems. This is honesty, and I've told you about yourself. Change this. You should be spending 10% of your attention on work, on three-dimensionality, and 90% on spiritual self-contemplation, on spiritual self-development, meaning spiritual self-development is a constant contact. A simple example, a simple everyday example from ordinary life. There is someone you care about, and you are in close contact with him. He is dear to you. You have common topics, and everything is fine. Leave him for 3 months. Don't talk at all, and then call. And there is nothing to talk about. There are no common topics. Isn't that so? And before that, he was the best friend, the closest person. You chatted for hours, and now you do not understand each other. You both have changed. Same is here. If you do not have contact with yourself, meaning you as personality, do not invest the power of attention into spiritual development, if you do not force your consciousness to think about the spiritual, to think, I emphasize, and to control yourself and observe yourself, then sorry, well, you will not have anything. No spiritual growth. It's true. Why many religions? They require a certain discipline. That is, 5 times a day you have to pray in some religions. In some religions you are supposed to do it in the morning, in the evening, before dinner. Well, there is no getting around it. Still, 5 times you are supposed to perform those very prayers. And it turns out that in actual fact, a person should return to prayer practice 5 times a day at a minimum. And the prayer practice should be properly performed at the level of feelings. It turns out that for a certain while, even getting ready for that, say, you wanted to eat, and your consciousness has to think that you need to perform the prayer first, and you already, it's 2 hours till dinner. But as soon as you've got hungry, the prayer has already begun working for you, meaning this is the right approach. That's the way kids were raised before. Now everything is a little bit different. But what's the difference? It was a more correct prayer practice, and people were more, through a prayer, they contacted the world of God. Yes, with the help of primary consciousness, initially of the secondary, then the primary, and then of the personality by perception through feelings. This has already become such a practice. But as for what we are talking about now, we removed the philosophy and left the practice, you see? It's like in martial arts. There are certain moves that lead to these or those results, yes. And there is a lot of philosophy on this move that is not needed at all. Meaning, the move is described on one page, and 2 volumes which are thicker than Allatra, this is the philosophy on this move, as if it will change it. Sorry, this is physics. And physics is physics. The faster, let's say, the person's fist moves to the point of contact, the more destructive the actions will be. That's all. This is banal physics. And everything else is philosophy that is loaded on. It is the consciousness that gets loaded in order to impart kind of a ritualistic aspect to this move. So does religion. Well, I don't mind, religion is wonderful, everything is great. But does it matter what clothes you wear and where you sit? On top of some mountain in the lotus position, wrapped there in a wet towel, drying it and meditating? Yes. Or do you, excuse me, sit at home in a comfortable, warm, say, chair, and are simply working on yourself, performing a spiritual practice. Less chance of getting sick for the body, which will also distract when it gets sick, but any defeat should be turned into victory. The body got sick, it means the system got distracted. Use this moment. The sickness can also benefit spiritual development. It really can. But again, you do not need to practice sorcery, and you do not need to direct the power of attention to recovery. Just take a pill and that's all, and get well. Perform a number of therapeutic procedures. You do not know which? In general, you mustn't engage in self-treatment. There is a doctor for that. You go to the doctor and get treatment. The doctor wants to live too. It's his job. Joking. Guys, questions?
May I, Igor Mikhailovich? You gave an example of this interaction that the left essence of one person interacted with the left essence of another person.
As a rule, essences by the same name interact, but you still need to consider the left essence. The left one, unlike, let's say, the others, can interact with other essences, depending on what the person needs.
Well, I wanted to...
This is not magic, and this is reality.
My example with the front essence, how is this felt overall? As an example of the interaction of people's front essences, I thought the left one worked.
And here the problem arises that the front essence of a person as part of the structure, it will still interact with something if, say, well, firstly, you won't convey this signal in its purity exactly via the front essence. The front essence is more like a contact with the spiritual world. In order to interact, say, with another fellow somehow positively, either way, the left essence will be activated. It will substitute, it will alter everything in its own way. Do you understand? Therefore, trying to convey your deep feelings to someone, well, give flowers and everything will be beautiful.
Igor Mikhailovich, consciousness, as I understand, tells me what I need to train, right? But namely, spiritual practices, it's like a kind of a training that you need to put in some efforts every day. and thus it plunges one into some kind of fight or something.
Now guys, fight, it will pull you in. It is impossible to fight with the system. And again, this is no training, it's practice, and practice is experience. Each spiritual practice, it should give you a certain experience. It's like a step, you know? You got up on the step, you shouldn't go down from it. The next practice should be such as to define one more step. Well, once upon a time they talked about this. Then from this, they built a different ladder in religions. Well, it's all gone wrong eventually. In general, it was once explained exactly with the example of a staircase, meaning you can climb the stairs to the world of God. Each time in your prayer or spiritual practice, overcome one of the steps, but without going down. Meaning it's not a training session, it's an experience. The correct performance of the spiritual practice is always about acquiring something new. New levels, new depth, a better perception of the spiritual world, more freedoms, meaning, well, here we can call it all by these associations for a long time, but basically you understand what I'm talking about. Meaning it is a personal spiritual experience, but this is not a training. The more we sit in meditation, well, I know people who have been sitting in meditation at least for 80 years already. As they have been sitting, so they still sit. Even among our people here, they have been sitting for years. As they have been sitting, so they still sit. But it's like akin to the situation that I came to church, lit a candle and went home, that's all. I performed my spiritual practice and I do so once a week. I'm a spiritual person. And now, neighbors envy me. I'm a spiritual person. I go to church, I light candles, right? Training and practice are two different things. Practical experience, it gives perfection. Consciousness must be tamed, not trained, but the body must be trained. And practices are practices. It is an experience. Go ahead.
Igor Mikhailovich, is it possible to expand on the burden of being the chosen one? How? Well, it says, thoughts come that you are the chosen one.
And I will say this, you are chosen and you've been really chosen. I do not see here a single person who has not been chosen. Just think about the fact that you have deceived tens of millions of your brethren. But it is you who are here now. I mean, the process of the creation of your body. If you are here, then you are already chosen. It means you already have a chance. And the rest, it's your choice and your work.
What is your opinion on today's meeting?
Many things have been revealed to me, and more seriousness has been added in self-improvement work, so as not to relax, but actually to work more.
Has it been useful?
The meeting has been useful, thank you.
It is worthwhile for each person to understand for himself where he falls, where he should get up. And I really hope there will be many things to reconsider and to act, and once again to act.
This is a sensation of such happiness, quiet one, silent. It doesn't leave, it continues to be with me. I'd like not to lose it, so that it would be permanently with me.
It's been very interesting because in the notebook I had a question, and as it always happens, they began answering other guys' questions and I was like crossing them out and out.
Have you crossed out the entire list?
Yes, there were interesting observations over myself, well, and certainly answers to interesting questions which always go beyond the questions themselves.
What my consciousness knew, but didn't want to speak aloud, has been said between the lines, and this has been simply said out loud.
I enjoyed it, very interesting, educational and very warm-hearted.
Everything is great. Consciousness, of course, as always has played a nasty trick on me. I failed to ask the questions in the way I wanted to.
Have you received the answer?
I think if there is a digital record, I would be very grateful, because I don't remember anything at all.
Excellent.
Wonderful.
Very useful.
Now there is something to think about and to work on. Thank you.
Shall we arrange more of such meetings?
I'm all for it.
It's very pleasant when everyone is able to ask their innermost question and receive an answer for themselves in such a friendly atmosphere. I wish there were more meetings like this.
And have you received answer to your questions?
And even more than that.
There is again plenty of new information of sorts, and the best part is that it seemed like I had already heard it, and then suddenly I got it.
It seems to me that there was more going on the invisible level than simply listening with ears, because usually when I film, I think over how to make a shot or something else, yet here it was vice versa. Oh, I haven't taken the shot. That is totally different. Thank you very much.
I didn't even ask questions, but I received so many answers that I'm feeling deeply grateful and joyful. The main thing is that filling up and that vector, which is not even towards understanding, but towards feeling of life. This is great gratitude. Thank you.
There are plenty of impressions, in fact. I'm sure that I will repeatedly go through these notes that I've made today for myself, will review, reread and apply all these in practice. It was very valuable to hear the questions of like-minded friends, the people who also work on themselves. It is so wonderful when we get together this way. This is precisely the state of unity, the state of a single whole, of one single organism that is spiritually evolving. I am very grateful to Igor Mikhailovich and to all those who have plucked up the courage today and voiced their questions, which they are really interested in.
This experiment with the pyramid is very interesting. Plenty has been said about it. Indeed, it has been given not without a reason.
The most wonderful feelings, a sensation of joy, happiness, gratitude for everything, just many things for everything.
Super.
And there are no questions.
There is just gratitude for the example of life.
The most amazing thing was that those questions which I wanted to ask, they were voiced by the audience, and there is such an understanding that everyone has identical questions that I even didn't open my mouth and didn't voice my questions. Yes, to my questions which everyone's consciousness is the same.
Great. You are beaming with happiness.
Thank you.
There were many answers precisely to internal questions that were not voiced. But somewhere at the deep inner level, they still come up. This inspires and supports on the spiritual path a great deal. Therefore, certainly enormous gratitude and internal joy for such a gift.
The keynote was honesty towards oneself and trust in God, and that's all. One should aim only at reaching God and shouldn't listen to one's consciousness. Therefore, it's been very useful for me.